Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of Ask Mr. Long Island. My name is Michael Watt, aka Mr. Long Island, and each week we meet with people who represent organizations that do great things for Long Island or bring up issues that need to be discussed to ensure Long Island's vitality. And this week we have Jude Treder from Mostly True Things, which is kind of ironic because part of Long Island's problem stems from the fact that we don't get a lot of truth, but that's completely irrelevant to what you do. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. Jude, thank you very much for joining us this week. And before we get into what you do, because it's fascinating and there's so many different facets of what you do that can be applied to, that people can take advantage of, what we like to do is discuss pizza. And the reason for that is every town on Long Island has one thing in common, a pizza place. And Long Islanders will drive past 10 pizza places to get to a good one. And the criteria we have is if you had people coming in from out of town and they wanted to experience really good Long Island pizza, where would you bring them?
I would take out-of-towners to CP Lamino's.
CP Lamino's?
In Miller Place.
In Miller Place. Where in Miller Place? On
And 25A.
Okay.
It was where I had my first date with my husband.
Okay.
Many, many years ago. So it was my very first Long Island pizza experience. And it's fun, and you can sit outside, and it's family.
Terrific.
Yeah.
And that's we'll add that to the list because I don't think that was mentioned before. Now you have a theater class, or you teach classes in improv, and then you put on regular shows called Mostly True Things. Talk to us a little bit about Mostly True Things.
Mostly True Things is a storytelling show that I created because Long Island didn't have anything like that, and the storytelling scene in New York City is very, very big and exciting, and there are lines around the block for storytelling slams and shows like that, and I would go to those shows and say, why don't we have that on Long Island? And so I created one. And it is a show where 4 people tell a 10-minute story.
Okay.
4 different people every single time. I work with people if they've never told a story before. I coach them. I'll do classes helping people develop their story, so it's a stage-ready piece. And 3 of the storytellers change their stories in some kind of way. Maybe
Okay.
they change the year that it happened, or maybe they change some details that if people were really listening, they might pick up on. One person tells the straight story. So we have the stories, then the audience gets to ask questions and try to discern who's the person that told the story with no altered details. So the audience really gets involved. It's very interactive
Right.
in that part of the show. And then they get a prize if they figure out who's the person that didn't change anything.
Well, I've been to one of these, and they're great. And what intrigues me about it is storytelling is as old as man. I mean,
Yep.
that's how the history of mankind really, for years before things were written down and before you had a printing press, it was stories told around the campfire because there was nothing to do once the sun went down.
Yep.
So it's an ancient art, I mean, really ancient. And you mentioned the audience interaction. I mean, it's a tiny theater. Tell us a little bit about the environment. Why would somebody want to go and participate in something like this?
Well, the first thing is it's very entertaining.
Right.
And the stories are from very different worlds. People bring, romance and comedy and drama from all different kind of walks of life. So you really could enter into 4 different kinds of worlds from the stories that the storytellers tell. And then the audience is often just as hilarious or interesting as the storytellers. And so with the things that they're picking up on, that as an audience member you might pick up on, might be something very different than what someone else picks up on. And there's a lot of back and forth that is as engaging and as fun as the first part of the show, which is listening to the stories. It's in a lovely black box theater. I would call that a black box theater. It's a studio theater
Right.
called the Performing Arts Studio.
It's very intimate. I mean,
Very intimate theater.
Right.
It could seat 100 people, but if you have 40 people, it still feels
Right.
full. It's a very nice space like that. So it's not an intimidating space for storytellers,
Right.
and yet it's got a full theater experience, lighting and sound and all of that. We have original songs that we wrote for each segment of the show to open it, to open up the questioning. We have a song for that. Now we have a new closing song. So there's music, there's fun, there's interaction, and really, really interesting stories.
And the fascinating thing about the theater, too, it's in downtown Port Jefferson. So
Correct.
you could really make a nice night out of it, especially now with the warmer weather coming. You walk into town, you get a nice meal, there's plenty of restaurants. You go to the theater, you see really unique entertainment. And then afterwards you go out, you have a cocktail or two or a coffee or whatever you want to do.
Exactly. Everything is right there, walking distance. I had friends come to the show 2 days ago from Connecticut. They took the ferry over.
Okay.
And they had lunch first. They went to the show. Then went to dinner first. So that's two Port Jefferson restaurants.
There you
They
go.
got some business. I had friends from Wisconsin, where I grew up, come out to see the show and see Port Jefferson for the first time. That stayed in a Port Jefferson hotel.
Wow.
And restaurants all in Port Jefferson, and they loved it. They'd never been there before.
You know, and it's funny because Port Jefferson to me, it really is almost a microcosm for Long Island. It's just such a beautiful downtown, and the ferry, you're just watching the ferry come in. It's a mesmerizing experience, but you have tremendous nightlife, and it's all walkable, which is, you know, you alluded to earlier that the storytelling is very big in the city. I mean, there's nothing more walkable than Manhattan, so it's all part of almost like a city experience, but in a downtown environment.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Very much so.
And it's like I mentioned before, it's very different. You know, it's a different kind of theater experience where the people in the audience are not shy, but the people telling the stories tend to have, the ones I saw anyway, all had a great sense of humor.
Right. Well, we work with that. Some of the people who tell stories are experienced speakers. Some of them are stand-up comedians that are now trying this new thing, because storytelling is different than
Right.
stand-up. It's a very different kind of entertainment form. Some people we had a guy who's a steam fitter who'd never told a story on stage before. And he did an awesome job.
Right.
So what I like about it, and one of my objectives, besides bringing a storytelling thing to life on Long Island, is to get stories from people from all walks of life.
Right.
I'd like to get a Long Island Railroad engineer. I'd like to get a story with 4 firefighters up there. Different kinds of worlds that people can learn about.
Right.
And people who never got up and told their story before. It's a very empowering thing to tell your story and have people really listen.
And if you think about it, storytelling is at the core of just about every form of entertainment. I mean, you could go see an action movie, but if there's no story behind it, if there's no compelling reason to root for the hero, for the protagonist, all it is, you know, computer animation shooting, you know, throwing bombs at each other.
That's right. There's some kind of heroic purpose, or there's something that someone's overcome, or there's something that is a sort of an unbelievable turn of events.
Right.
That come together to really inspire people or make people feel a lot of emotions, and that's really what's fun for me as the person hosting, coaching people, helping them create their stories, and creating an evening of entertainment, is getting all those different kinds of moments
Right.
in every show if I can.
And even, you know, it's thinking about advertisement. A 30-second commercial is a short story. You know, somebody...
True.
You have to have an instant likability to the person on the screen. It doesn't always happen that way. Then there has to be a problem, and the product has to solve this, you know, present the solution to the problem.
Right.
And they all ride off happily ever after.
That's
you
right.
know. Next thing you know, you're throwing a football through a tire, and you're all set. All right, so that's the storytelling. And how often are those shows?
They're once a month.
Uh-huh.
The next one is on Sunday, May 17th at 6 p.m.
Okay.
Then there's one on Saturday, June 20th at 7 p.m. Then we'll be off for the 2 months of July and August.
Okay.
Then we'll come back once a month in September, October, November, and during the Dickens Festival next year, we're going to do 2 shows a day.
Wow, okay. And the Dickens Festival, those who don't know, I think it's the first Saturday of every December.
First weekend.
The first
The
weekend.
entire weekend.
Downtown Port Jefferson turns into Charles Dickens. It's a very holiday-centric event, which is, again, extremely unique to Long Island and
Yeah.
really speaks well to what they try to do over in Port Jefferson. Let's segue a little bit into some of the other endeavors that you have. I'm really intrigued by the improv classes that you teach. Walk us through that a little bit.
I've been studying improv for many, many years. I still...
You know, I'm sorry, just what is improv? People, you hear the term all the time.
Right.
I'm not sure everybody's really
Okay.
familiar with what
Well,
it
as
is.
opposed to scripted theater, when people in scripted experiences in life, but in theater, where actors get on the stage and know what they're going to say and do and try to infuse that with spontaneity in life in order to make it a living scene that people want to watch. Improvisation, actors are doing that on the spot with each other through their interaction, creating a moment, creating a scene, and telling a story, and going beat by beat and telling a story. It's a set of skills that is not easy to learn. It's a ton of fun to learn. Every aspect of learning it is fun and interesting, and it definitely takes people out of their comfort zone. But when we
Okay.
watch improvisation, we're seeing people getting on the same page with each other by really listening, connecting through a series of exercises that actors or improvisers learn to do off the stage, to really get on the same page, pick up cues from one another, and build something that no one knows was going to happen ahead of time.
That's a really important point, because when you think of improv and you talk about famous scenes in movies where they said the actor just improvised the whole script, and like Jim Carrey's famous for that, and there's a couple others. It seems like he's making it up off the top of his head, but it's really much more involved than that. You're not just spouting something out. There's a lot of thought, and you said there's a lot of discipline to it. There
is a lot of discipline. There's basic rules of improv that make that happen, that make an actor or a person able to be creative in a moment and have it work and not just be some random
comment.
Curb Your Enthusiasm, Larry David show on HBO, is largely improvised. But it follows the same rules that we use in the workshops, which are rules that are very good for relationships, and they're very good for business partnerships, and they're very good for navigating life. Listen, respect your partner, collaborate well with others, make agreements and keep them, build on what's been given.
Okay.
Not be afraid of mistakes. If you do make a mistake, keep going.
What would constitute a mistake? Can you give me an example of that?
Well, for example, in improvisation, the first rule is yes and, which means if somebody gives an offer,
okay.
If someone says...
I mean, somebody has to start the discussion.
So, so if somebody says, thanks for joining me here in the cockpit of the space shuttle.
Okay.
And they've thrown you into a world. And you as a partner say, this isn't the space shuttle. That would be a mistake.
Okay.
Because you'd be denying the offer.
Right.
If you build on it, so that would be... You could immediately correct that mistake in improv because the scene isn't going to go anywhere. And it's very similar to most interactions in life where something is kind of thrown at us.
Right.
Things can happen that throw a curve. And if we instantly say, that's not right, that's not happening, I'm not going there, I'm not going to roll with that.
Well, it strikes me a little bit almost like being in a band, where a guitar player will play something and the other instrument players kind of have to react to that.
Correct. In fact, jazz is the place where this really all started.
Okay, but I don't want to get off track because you're making a great point about it. I was just curious when you say you make a mistake. I wouldn't even know. If it's not scripted,
right.
What would be a mistake?
Right, because there are these tenets of improv that have to do with...
So there's like fundamental rules to an improvisational skit.
That make it
right.
possible
okay.
to do inventive, creative, and innovative events occur.
Okay.
And it happens through interaction, and there's those kinds of things, making agreements, saying yes, listening, collaborating, and building on from there. And really interesting things can happen. So we do these workshops where the people who come to the workshops that I do generally aren't doing improv in order to get on stage and perform. That's not the objective. They want to do improv to be a really responsive teacher, to be a really responsive therapist, to be a really responsive manager that's able to listen, that's able to work with other people, and to accept what's been given and work with it, rather than sort of be rigid and have expect people to follow when there's a lot more flexible rules and creative ways to get a group to follow us.
So it's really more of a discipline than anything else, where you practice the art of listening and you really process the words that you're hearing as opposed to waiting till the other person stops speaking because then it's your turn.
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you say it works. I'm picturing a couple of business people making a presentation. Now, if it's too scripted, people zone out. All right, but you also have to be careful. You don't want to say the wrong thing. That's why I was intrigued about that. So you have a leader of the discussion, and he or she will start the discussion, but the other players kind of build on what's being said.
Well, when we're doing an improvisation, say, in a workshop setting that's then translatable to a situation like you're saying, we might create a moment or create a scene that's using these skills of accepting what's been given and building on it. So if what's been given is that you look at the group and it feels like they're tuning out.
Right.
Let's say there's a team of people presenting an idea,
right.
or pitching an advertising thing, or pitching something to a group, and it seems like the group is tuning out. If you have skills in improvisation, there's a well of kind of creative energy that you can have that kind of engages those people rather than talking over them. Just keep going the way we planned because we don't have any other tools in the toolbox.
Right.
It gives you a sense of a bunch of tools and a mindset that says whatever goes on in this meeting, I can connect with people,
Right.
and I can build on what's been given and engage them, maybe even by asking questions of them, and still hit all the points that we want to make.
And one of the things that we touched upon earlier that I found fascinating, as you hone these improvisational skills and you bring this discipline to any interaction, and I'm thinking like an environment where you're doing business networking, where you walk into a room full of people and you don't really know anybody else,
Right.
which is really a good situation because you're there to meet new people, that can be very stressful for a lot of people. And the fact that you're empowered with these improvisational skills and these listening skills, can you walk us through a little bit about how that would help you in a networking situation?
Absolutely. Because in an improvisation workshop, we might do a game where it's a one line at a time story.
Okay.
So I say a line, you say a line. So I'm third in line, and I think the story is going in a given direction, but the person right in front of me takes the story in a different direction. So I have to think on my feet and say something out loud that I have to make up in the moment.
Right.
Now, that may or may not work. It may not go well, but it's getting just past your comfort zone.
Right.
Getting uncomfortable enough and on edge enough to feel like you're stretching,
Right.
but not so much that the stress response happens and you shut down. And every time people practice any of these kinds of games where you're in that discomfort zone, a little bit out of what you really can't predict what's going to happen,
Right.
it strengthens that psychological muscle to be on and be in a situation of discomfort and be able to pilot through it and speak up for yourself and be spontaneous, even though it's in a stressful environment.
So you're making the stress work for you. And ironically, the more prepared you are, the less stressful it is.
Yes, the more prepared we are with these skills, because
Right.
then we're able to really connect with other people. And there's a toolbox other than just I have this speech and I'm going to say it,
Right.
and I'm going to get my point across. It's more of an interaction. It's more about being able to take social cues from the world around us and use them. That's really what improv teaches people to do. And that's what makes improv interesting on stage. It's also what makes it fun to do.
And the really fascinating part is the better you are at listening to what people say and eliciting more information from them, the better you are considered to be a conversationalist.
It's true.
Yeah.
Right. It has to be that the real human interaction.
Right. And when people feel like you're listening, they just feel better about you, and it helps cement that relationship a little bit. We talked about a lot of things. You have a couple of different websites you could throw at us so people can go and learn more about the Mostly True things and the improvisational classes.
Correct. www.mostlytruethings.com. That's the
Okay.
storytelling website, has all the information about that. And lifestage.org
Lifestage.org.
has all our improv workshops and blog posts and information about that work.
And to me, the real important takeaway, the improv class isn't necessarily about getting on stage. It's about learning and honing your listening skills so you become a better individual, a better citizen, better business person, better conversationalist.
And collaborator.
And collaborator.
Correct.
Jude, this was terrific. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.
Thanks for having me.
Fascinating topic. This has been another episode of Ask Mr. Long Island. My name is Michael Watt, a.k.a. Mr. Long Island, and I thank you very much for joining us today.